Hello, everyone, and welcome to another broadcast of Words of Truth and Reason. The title of our podcast comes from the statement of the Apostle Paul in Acts chapter 26, verse 25, wherein he called the gospel of Christ, quote, the words of truth and reason, end quote. It is the purpose of this podcast to show that, in fact, the Bible contains the very essence of both truth and reason. We thank you for listening to us today. If this is your first time listening in, we welcome you. If you have tuned in before, then we welcome you back. My name is Brother Travis Quitermus. I am your host for Words of Truth and Reason. I am the minister for the Clarkson, Kentucky Church of Christ. If you're ever in our area, we certainly invite you to come and worship with us. And certainly we would invite you to visit the closest sound Church of Christ in your community if you would like to learn more and to know more about God, His Son, and His plan for your life. Today I am going to present a broadcast entitled A Review of the Warren Flu Debate. All of my life, I have been interested in the study of Christian evidences, which is known theologically as apologetics. You may hear the word apology at the root of the word apologetics. Now, that does not mean that I or other Christian apologists are sorry that we are Christians. Rather, it comes from the Greek word apologia, which means to give a reasoned defense. And that is what the aim of Christian evidences, also known as apologetics, is all about. The Warren Flu debate was on the subject of the existence of God, which, of course, is at the very foundation of Christian apologetics. It was a 4-night oral debate held in the Coliseum on the campus of North Texas State University, September 20th through 23rd, 1976, in Denton, Texas. The disputants were Dr. Anthony G. N. Flew, representing atheism, professor of philosophy at Reading University in England. Dr. Flew was the most well-known atheist in the world and its foremost advocate and defender. The other disputant in the debate was Dr. Thomas B. Warren, professor of philosophy of religion and apologetics, Harding Graduate School of Religion, Memphis, Tennessee. The debate began with Dr. Flew affirming, "I know that God does not exist." Dr. Warren, of course, denied Flew's proposition and sought to show that it was logically unsound and should therefore be rejected, while Flew sought to argue in its favor, that it was true and ought to be accepted. The second half of the debate saw them switch sides, as it were. Dr. Warren affirmed that "I know that God does exist," while, of course, Flew, in the negative, denied it. Now, I want to go over some of Dr. Warren's responses to Professor Flew, and also to go over some of Dr. Warren's affirmative arguments demonstrating the proof that, in fact, God does exist. This is the debate that fired my fascination with apologetics. This debate really helped to ground my faith. As a young person, I read it initially when I was 16 years of age. It was a gift to me from our local minister, and it has continued to be a blessing all of my life. It is still in print, in book form. You can also watch the Warren Flew debate on YouTube. And I certainly would encourage you to do both. Read the book and watch the video discussion. It is not too strong a claim to say that Dr. Warren took atheism to the woodshed and absolutely wore it out. This debate is an absolute demolition of atheism. And I think you will see that as the debate goes on. Now, obviously, in this short discussion, I cannot review everything that was said. I hope to give you enough that you will be interested in reading the entire debate or watching the entire debate online. If you are an atheist and if you are an honest atheist, I think at the end of studying this debate, you will cease to be an atheist or you will cease to be honest, one of the two. And if you are a Christian, this debate will put real muscle on your faith. It will put backbone in your beliefs. It will show you that you can be reasonable and still be a Christian. And so it will immeasurably strengthen your faith as a child of God. Now, in Brother Warren's first negative, and I should say in the interest of full disclosure, Thomas B. Warren was all of his life a member of the Church of Christ, just as I am. And he is one of the, in my opinion, greatest debaters and preachers of the 20th century. And I think some of that will be borne out when you listen to the crystal clear arguments and responses he makes in this debate with Professor Flew. He begins his first negative on the first night of the debate as follows. Dr. Flew, gentlemen moderators, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to come before you to reply to the speech to which you have just listened, and I would like, by way of helping you see what I plan to do in my negative response, and to call your attention to my chart on the overhead projector, chart number 9. Now on this chart you will see a series of rooms. I want you to envision these rooms as being made of steel and concrete with no windows or doors. There are no holes in either the floor or the floors or the windows. And Dr. Flew is in the innermost room. And the only way he can arrive at atheism is to come through all of these walls. And I submit to you that he is in the midst of a prison, and that he not only cannot come through all of the walls, but that he cannot come through any of the walls. Basic to his contention that he knows that there is no God, there are certain things that he must know before he can know that his proposition is true. Now I'm going to describe to you Brother Warren's chart number 9, which was entitled Flew's Prison, from which he cannot escape to atheism. Again, remember that on the chart, he showed a series of rooms within rooms. These rooms have no doors, they have no windows, they have no holes. Yet each of these walls represents an intellectual impossibility which Dr. Flew cannot prove, but which he must prove before he can prove that atheism is true and that God does not exist. Now, Flew begins in the innermost room of this intellectual prison. In order to break out or escape to the next level, he must first prove that matter is eternal and that matter is all that has existed or does exist. In order to escape to the next room, he must know and be able to prove that life arose from rocks and dirt. That is, it arose from that which is non-living. In order to escape to the next level of the prison, he must be able to prove that consciousness arose from that which had no consciousness. Now, we might just say a word on the definition of consciousness. It is the awareness of one's own existence. It is a characteristic only of human beings. No matter how intelligent animals may be, such as dolphins or chimpanzees, they are not aware of their own existence. The blue whale has the largest brain on the planet, and yet the blue whale is not aware of his own existence. My friend, Brother Wayne Jackson, himself a renowned apologist, once said that human beings are the only creatures who can think about their own brains. That is what it means to be conscious. Then Dr. Flew must, in escaping from that level of the prison, he must then proceed to affirm and prove that conscience, that sense of right and wrong within us, that guilty feeling in the pit of our stomach when we know we've done wrong, that's what the conscience is. That the conscience arose from that which had no conscience. And then he must prove that intelligence arose from that which had no intelligence. And the last thing, in order to escape from his intellectual prison and prove that atheism is true and God does not exist, that human beings arose from that which was not human. Dr. Warren on this chart wrote, the path which Flew must follow if he is to prove his proposition, make his way to the point that he knows that God does not exist, but he cannot get through any of these prison walls. Unless he can find a door through every one of these rooms, he will be manifestly defeated. He didn't find a door through any of these walls in the intellectual prison that is atheism. And therefore, he was completely defeated in this debate. And it wasn't just Dr. Flew. No atheist has been able to escape from this prison. There are things which he must prove, but that he cannot prove before he can know that God exists. Now, Dr. Flew's proposition, as Dr. Warren points out, is an example of a universal negative. I know that God does not exist. And yet it is impossible to prove a universal negative. Therefore, atheism is itself irrational because it represents a belief in a universal negative, a statement which cannot be proved and is therefore irrational. The law of rationality states that we will accept as true only that for which one has sufficient evidence. No atheist has sufficient evidence that God does not exist. Dr. Flew didn't have it. No modern atheist has it. No ancient atheist had it, and is therefore an unprovable proposition. One area that Brother Warren pressed Dr. Flew on was the nature of ethics and morality. Is it objective and absolute, or is it subjective and dependent upon each person's opinion and beliefs? They had signed an agreement that each man was allowed to ask his opponent up to 10 questions to be submitted and answered before each night of the debate began. Now, Brother Warren took advantage of this rule. Dr. Flew did not. On the first night of the debate, 2 questions in particular pressed Dr. Flew to give an answer on the origin and nature of morality. Again, let me quote Brother Warren. Let us begin with noting question number 1. True or false? Value did not exist before the first human being. He answers that as true. Now that means, according to Dr. Flew, that before there was a human being on earth, and he recognizes that human beings came into being at a certain point in time, there was absolutely no value. Therefore, if value began, or at least it did not exist before human beings, then value could be nothing more than a function of the human mind. It can be nothing more than what one likes or dislikes, such as liking or not liking spinach, his approvals or disapprovals. And that means that even the horrors of the Nazis in Germany, where they took even little children and put them in boxcars with quicklime so that they not only would die, but would die excruciatingly, are nothing more than one's individual approval or disapproval. In just a moment, I want to go into more detail than that, but at least I wanted you to see how he has answered this question. Question number 2. In murdering 6 million Jewish men and women and children, the Nazis were guilty of real, objective, moral wrong. It has long been a contention of the atheists that we should reject theism because it entails self-contradiction. But notice, in answer to my first question, Dr. Flew in a move which involves him in a rejection of the basic argument he made in his first speech, has pitched morality purely on the subjective basis. That is, that morality is solely and completely a function of the human mind. For according to Flew, there was no value before there were human beings. But now he says the Nazis were guilty of real objective moral wrong. That means real moral wrong which obtains an objective standard. My friends, an atheist simply cannot fit together these first two questions. If there is, in fact, an objective standard of right and wrong, then there is an objective moral lawgiver who set those moral truths into existence in the first place. Dr. Warren would go on to press Dr. Flew on this point. But note, there is a conscience within man that will simply not allow Dr. Flew to accept that kind of ungodly doctrine, that the German nation had the right to invent a law which, because of the alleged needs and desires of their own society, allowed them to seek to exterminate this nation of people, not only to exterminate them, but to do so in the most agonizing ways, e.g., to build roads to the east in such a fashion that none of them could survive the ordeal. Robert Jackson, one of the Supreme Court Justices of the United States, who was the prosecutor, in his closing address during the Nuremberg trials, had this to say: these men should be tried on this basis, on a higher law which rises above the provincial. And Dr. Flew explains, the provincial is the area of Germany, the geographical area, and the transient. Again, Dr. Flew explains, or rather Dr. Warren explains, the period of time in which the Nazis had charge of Germany. In other words, he, Jackson, contended that the Nazis did not have the right to invent a law within their own nation and say, this is right for us, even if it is wrong for you. Now let us note, if there is no higher law, if there is no law which rises above the provincial and the transient, above what is involved in a certain locality during a certain period of time, by which the conduct of individuals and or societies may be correctly judged as either morally right or morally wrong, then it is false to say the Nazis actually did real wrong in murdering 6 million Jewish men, women, and children. But Dr. Flew insists they did do wrong. Therefore, he has admitted that there is a higher law than the transient and the provincial. So, friends, you see that even though atheism implies moral subjectivism, that ethics is simply a product of one's own opinions and beliefs, depending upon whatever situation you may be in, every man has a conscience. The words ought and ought not are as much a part of the atheist's vocabulary as they are the Christian's. We know that there are certain things that are always right and always wrong, and the existence of these absolute moral standards implies that God, who is the ultimate lawgiver, in fact exists. And Dr. Flew never found a way around that important point. On another of his charts, Dr. Warren showed that ethical relativity, which atheism implies, is logically contradictory. And again, he returned to the Nazis and the Jews in order to prove this. He noted on one of his charts that the claim of the Nazi is it was morally right for the Germans to try to exterminate the Jews, whereas the Jews affirmed it was morally wrong for the Germans to try to exterminate the Jews. And then he noted, thus, given Flew's basic position, it follows that 1, that it was morally right, and 2, that it was morally wrong for the Nazis to try to exterminate the Jews. That is a logical self-contradiction, and therefore ethical relativity is false, and atheism, which implies it must be true, is also false. Now, Brother Warren also introduced the argument from design, known as the teleological argument, from the Greek word teleos, meaning design. in order to show that God exists. If wherever there is design, there must be a designer. He demonstrated that there are things that evolution cannot do, which must therefore be the result of intelligent design by God. One of the arguments he introduced was from the human blood system in our body, our circulatory system. The means by which blood and oxygen are circulated throughout our bodies. He wrote this: "Now, friends, none of us can live more than 5 minutes without oxygen. There must occur in the human lungs, in the alveoli, the air passage and the blood passage, an osmosis of oxygen into the blood from the air and carbon dioxide from the blood into the air passage. This occurs because of a difference of pressure tension in the air passage of the oxygen particles as over against what is in the oxygen of the blood. So the oxygen in the air passes through the capillary wall into the blood, but the carbon dioxide, because of a difference of pressure in the carbon dioxide in the blood and in the air, passes through the capillary wall into the air, and therefore it could not have evolved, since all atheists recognize that it demands millions of years to bring about changes which involve such complexity." End quote. He went into great detail throughout the course of the debate on the human circulatory system, again, without which we cannot live even 5 minutes, because we cannot survive without oxygen for more than 5 minutes. And he showed that therefore this could not have evolved over millions of years, that it cannot have evolved by time and chance, as atheism demands, as evolution demands that it must. There's simply not enough time. This is an example of design in the human body, which demands a designer. Now, another very powerful argument which he introduced was with regard to comparing a human hand with an artificial hand. Now, he said this, Brother Warren did: "Now, his dodge about the fact that we grow as over against a car being made simply will not do. I want to see on the screen chart number 42-A8. Now, you will note on this screen we have a natural hand and a mechanical hand. I have asked the question, is it true or false that the natural hand was planned and designed? And he answered, no, it is not. On the right, the hand that is mechanical, he says it was planned and designed. Now, friends, I submit to you that the natural hand is tremendously greater than any mechanical hand that man has ever made. Dr. Flew would say the same thing if a man had a bone which reached from his thigh bone socket to his knee, made out of synthetic material that has no bone marrow in it, but man cannot live without bone marrow. Dr. Flew would say that the bone made out of synthetic material is great. It is so great that it demands a designer, someone with intelligence, someone to plan it. That now tonight he has alleged that the natural thigh bone, which we must have, which could not have evolved according to his admissions, can be accounted for by sheer chance, such as from a whirlwind blowing against the mountainside, with a human thigh resulting from it. And so, friends, you see that though they will admit the mechanical hand had a designer, it's clearly a designed implement, yet the human hand upon which it was based, and which is vastly superior in every way, simply grew, evolved by chance. Is that a rational position to take? Reasoning from the lesser to the greater, we can see that if the mechanical hand, which was based upon the natural hand, had a designer, then can we not see that it follows the human hand, the natural hand, also had a designer because of its far greater complexity and design? If the one is designed, why is the other not also designed? Of course it is. Design demands a designer, and that designer can only be God. Now, friends, I have simply touched the hem of the proverbial garment when it comes to a review of the Warren Flew debate. And I encourage you to read the debate, and I encourage you to watch the debate on YouTube or order videos of it, which you can also purchase online. And I think, again, you will be amazed at how weak the case for atheism was, even though it was defended by its greatest representative at the time, Dr. Anthony Flew. Now, before we sign off, I want you to be aware of the fact that a few years before he died, Dr. Flew rejected atheism. Now, he did not become a Christian, but he did become a believer in a supreme being. And in what I believe was the last book he wrote before he died, which was entitled, There Is a God, How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind. He mentions the debate with Brother Warren. And he says that Brother Warren had an impressive array of charts and slides, and that everyone there was very hospitable. But, quote, the debate ended with both Warren and I sticking to our guns. But surely Dr. Flew realized how badly he had been defeated in that debate. Certainly other atheists realized it, because another atheist philosopher by the name of Wallace Matson challenged Warren to another debate on the existence of God. And the Warren-Matson debate is still in print, as well as the Warren Flew debate. And he demolished Matson just as much as he had demolished Flew. But I want you to hear what led. The reason I say that I think Brother Warren's arguments and his complete defeat in the debate with Professor Warren had to plant the seeds of doubt where unbelief was concerned, because the evidence that led him to change his mind were the very things that Brother Warren pressed him on in that debate. Listen to what he says in his book. Science qua science cannot furnish an argument for God's existence. But the three items of evidence we have considered in this volume, the laws of nature, life with its teleological organization. By the way, remember the word teleological means, refers to the design in the cosmos. And the existence of the universe can only be explained in the light of an intelligence that explains both its own existence and that of the world. Such a discovery of the divine does not come through experiments and equations, but through an understanding of the structures they unveil and map. Now, all of this might sound abstract and impersonal. How, it might be asked, do I, as a person, respond to the discovery of an ultimate reality, and he capitalized the word reality, that is an omnipresent and omniscient spirit? Again, he capitalized the word spirit. I must say again that the journey to my discovery of the divine has thus far been a pilgrimage of reason. I have followed the argument where it has led me, and it has led me to accept the existence of a self-existent, immutable, immaterial, omnipotent, and omniscient being. Now again, Dr. Flew never became a Christian, but he certainly described the God of the Bible in that last statement. Friends, the Bible was exactly right. In Psalm 14:1, where King David wrote, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." Thankfully, Dr. Flew came to realize how foolish it was. And in a nation that is becoming increasingly filled with unbelievers, it is my prayer that those who sincerely, honestly listen to this debate and who investigate the matter further will come to the same conclusion that Dr. Flew came, that there is a God. We thank you so much for listening today. And if you have any other questions or comments, we would encourage you to leave them on this podcast, wherever you may be listening to it at. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a subscription if you are so inclined. We thank you for listening. We pray that God will use this podcast to bless you and help you to come to a true and saving faith in Him. Thank you for listening to this edition of Words of Truth and Reason. We look forward to being with you again very soon. May God bless.